In the vast deserts of Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, the quiet facade of a trailer concealed a chamber of unspeakable horrors. The man behind this nightmare was David Parker Ray, infamously known as the Toy Box Killer. The chilling moniker belied the true nature of his deeds, which plunged victims into a waking nightmare beyond imagination. Our episodes deal with serious and often distressing incidents. If at any time you feel like you need support, please contact your local crisis centre. This episode discusses murder and sexual offences, and therefore may be graphic and upsetting. It may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised. David Parker Ray was born on November 6, 1939, in Belen, New Mexico, to father Cecil Leland Ray, a mechanic and native of Oregon, and mother Nettie Opal Parker, who had been born in Texas. During his childhood, Ray and his younger sister, Peggy Pearl Ray, lived with his mother's disciplinarian parents, Russell and Dolly Parker, on a small ranch due to their poor financial condition. He was sporadically visited by his violent, alcoholic father, who would supply him with magazines depicting sadomasochistic pornography. At Mountain Air High School in Mountain Air, New Mexico, he was bullied by his peers for his shyness around girls, which resulted in his abusing alcohol and other drugs. Ray's sexual fantasies of raping, torturing, and even murdering women developed during his teenage years. When Ray was 14 years old, his sister saw his sadomasochistic drawings and pornographic pictures of bondage practices. As a result, Ray and his sister became estranged. Based on statements made by Ray, he is believed to have begun assaulting women as an adolescent. In an advisory message that was tape recorded by Ray on July 23, 1993, he claimed, "I've been raping bitches ever since I was old enough to jerk off and tie little girls' hands behind their back." He even alleged to his first wife that he had committed his first murder sometime in 1957 when he kidnapped a woman, tied her to a tree, tortured, and finally murdered her. However, authorities were unable to verify his account. After completing high school, Ray received an honourable discharge from the United States Army, where his service included work as a general mechanic. Ray then worked as a maintenance man for the New Mexico Parks Department in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, for the entirety of his adulthood until his arrest. The resort town, Truth or Consequences in New Mexico, located approximately 5 miles from Elephant Butte, contains several local bars which Ray frequented for victims. In 1997, Ray met 37-year-old Cindy Hendy, who worked at a state park in Truth or Consequences and who was fleeing convictions on grand theft and drug charges in Washington state. They became romantically involved and bonded over their shared violent sexual fantasies. In a recorded message, Ray told his victims that they would be forced to sexually service Hendy as well. Ray was divorced 4 times and had 2 children, including one whom would later become an accomplice for his crimes, daughter Glenda Jessie Jean Ray. Jessie had previously tried to warn the FBI about her father's criminal activity in 1986. FBI agent Doug Belden recalled Jessie Ray's claims. She alleged that David Parker Ray was abducting and torturing women and selling them to buyers in Mexico. However, the allegations were so non-specific that the FBI were not able to arrest Ray. The nightmare would begin with abduction. Ray prowled the highways, seeking targets for his sinister experiments. Once captured, victims were transported to the secluded trailer, where they faced a meticulously planned sequence of psychological and physical torture. Ray recorded audio tapes detailing the horrifying fate that awaited them. The victims, often drugged into a submissive state, woke to a living nightmare. Chained to a gynecological table, they were subjected to brutal assaults, sadistic rituals, and unspeakable acts of violence. Ray's perverse imagination knew no bounds, and the horrors inflicted upon these individuals were beyond the comprehension of any humane mind. On March 19, 1999, 22-year-old Cynthia Vigil was driving into a parking lot in Albuquerque, New Mexico. A man claiming to be an undercover cop told her she was under arrest for solicitation of sex work and put her in the back of his car. That man was David Parker Ray. Cynthia Vigil was brought to Ray's nearby toy box. Ray's toy box was not a realm of innocence, but a soundproof trailer filled with instruments of torture designed to break the spirit and crush any semblance of hope. The walls were adorned with explicit diagrams illustrating the intended torment. This chamber was the epicenter of Ray's sadistic fantasies, where he carried out a series of heinous crimes against unsuspecting victims. Ray chained Cynthia Vigil to a table in the trailer. Over the next 3 days, the toy box killer raped and tortured Vigil with help from his girlfriend and accomplice Cindy Hendy. Ray and Hendy used whips, medical and sexual instruments, and electric shocks to torment Vigil. Just before her torture, David Parker Ray would play a cassette tape with a recording detailing what she would be forced to endure. On the cassette, Ray explained that she was to refer to him only as master, and the woman with him as mistress, and never to speak unless spoken to first. He then went on to explain exactly how he would rape and abuse her. A tape that Ray called his orientation. We will now play the 5-minute tape, which was obtained through a Freedom of Information request through the New Mexico Public Inspection of Records Act. We must warn you, however, it is incredibly graphic and brutal to listen to. Listener discretion is again advised. If you wish to skip the recording, please skip to 12 minutes and 20 seconds.
Okay, bitch. We both know what you've been brought here for. A lot of fucking and sucking. Your wrists and ankles are chained, and you're gagged because you're not going to like the way I do it. You're going to be kept here, naked and chained down. I'm going to use you for a sex slave. I'm into bondage and S&M. It's kind of hard to find willing partners that goes for that shit. So when I get the urge, I go out, find me some good-looking little bitch that turns me on, kidnap her, and keep her in my playroom for a while for a sex toy. And this time it's your turn. You're going to be tied or chained in different positions, whipped, raped repeatedly in your cunt, mouth, and asshole, and your tits and sex organs are going to be abused and tortured in a variety of different ways. I'm not going to cut you up or do anything that'll cause serious injury. And don't worry about being killed. I don't plan to do that either. As long as you don't know me, you don't present a risk. And in a week or two, when I'm through with you, you can be turned loose. Your tits, pussy, and asshole is going to be stretched, swollen, and sore as hell. You'll have some whip marks, and you'll probably have a few blisters on your tits, nipples, and sex organs from cigarette burns, but nothing that won't heal up in a few days. You're going to be tied in a variety of different positions, but for the most part, you'll be kept on a rectangular table, chained down, spread-eagled, your legs forced extremely wide apart. If your tits are big enough, I'm going to tie ropes around them and squeeze them with the ropes. They'll also be squeezed with a breast press, and I'm going to put clamps on each one of your nipples with long nylon cords on each one, and tie the cords very tight to ceiling rings overhead. I'm going to see just how far I can stretch your tits. And we're going to stretch your clit. And if you pass out while I'm doing this shit, I'll revive you with ammonia inhalants. I want you to feel every second of it. And if you piss on yourself, I'm going to insert a catheter plug in your urethra. Stop the hole up. The plug that I've got's pretty big and it's painful. And I'll leave it in until you're turned loose. I'm going to use an electroshock machine with the clamps attached to your nipples and clit are two metal probes that'll be inserted into your pussy and asshole. And I'm going to stick needles in and through your nipples, tits, clit, and cunt lips. I have a hell of a good assortment of dildos, different sizes, everything from standard penis size up into some real monsters, 3.5, 4 inches thick, about as big as a baby's head. What I plan to do with you is start with the smaller ones. Stick them in your cunt and ass, play in your holes for a while, and each time a dildo is taken out, a little bit larger one will be put back in its place. I'm going to experiment on you and see how large your holes can eventually be stretched. I've done it to a lot of women over the years, and you'd be surprised at how large dildos that I'm eventually going to be able to force into you, particularly in your pussy. But hell, it's designed to have a baby come out of. I'm just going to be going the wrong way. I'm sure that it goes without saying that you will not be given any opportunity to escape. A long, heavy chain is going to be kept locked around your neck all the time that you're here. Even if you did manage to get your hands and feet loose, there's no way in hell you'd get that chain over your head. I've told you exactly what I plan to do, and it's going to be painful as hell. That's the way I want it to be. But it is not part of my fantasies to do permanent damage, unless I'm provoked. And I've got a hell of a bad temper. I'm vindictive as hell. I move around a lot, so it's of little consequence if you know where you're being kept. Because when you're released, I'll be on my way to some other town or state. But don't try to find out too much about me. If I thought that you knew enough to cause serious problems, you would not be turned loose. You would simply disappear. Don't do anything to create a situation where it might become necessary. But so much for that. I think you get the point. And right at the moment, I'm pretty anxious to get you chained down on your back with your legs wide apart so I can give you a good examination. See what I've got to work with the next few days. As soon as I turn this tape off, you will have an excellent opportunity to try to beg for me to turn you loose. I may or may not be able to understand you through the gag, but if you want to, feel free to try. I love to listen to a bitch beg and plead. And this is the end of the tape.
On the third day of Cynthia Vigil's abduction and torture, while David Parker Ray was at work, Hendy accidentally left the keys to Vigil's restraints on a table near where Vigil was chained up. Seizing the opportunity, Vigil lunged for the keys and freed her hands. Hendy attempted to stop her escape, but Vigil was able to stab her with an ice pick. She ran out of the trailer naked, wearing only a slave collar and padlock chains. In desperation, she knocked on the door of a nearby mobile home. The homeowner brought Vigil inside and called the police. The police attended and promptly arrested both David Parker Ray and Cindy Hendy, and learned of their many sickening crimes. Another victim, Angelica Montano, came forward with a similar story to that of Vigil. She said that she had been held captive by Ray after Hendy invited her to the house to pick up a cake mix. After being raped and tortured, Montano convinced the pair to release her along the highway. She was picked up by an off-duty law enforcement officer and told him what happened, but he did not believe her and left her at a bus stop. She also later called police about the incident, but there had been no follow-up. Police identified another victim, Kelly Garrett, from a videotape which dated from 1996. Garrett was found alive in Colorado after police identified her from a tattoo on her ankle. She testified that she had gotten into a fight with her husband and decided to spend the night playing pool with friends. Ray's daughter, Jessie, who knew Garrett, took her to the Blue Water Saloon in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, and may have drugged the beer she was drinking. She offered Garrett a ride home, but instead took her to her father's house. Garrett said she endured 2 days of torture before Ray drove her back to her home. Ray told her husband that he had found the woman incoherent on a beach. Her husband did not believe that she could not remember where she had been, and Garrett said she did not know what to tell police and so did not contact them. Her husband later sued for divorce and Garrett moved to Colorado. After Ray's arrest, the FBI sent 100 agents to examine Ray's property and surroundings, but no identifiable human remains were found. While awaiting trial, Ray spoke to FBI profilers and said that he was fascinated by the kidnapping of Colleen Stan and other sexually motivated kidnappings. The FBI had spoken to Ray as early as 1989 in connection with his business manufacturing and selling bondage-related sexual devices. During the trial, a judge ruled that the cases for crimes against Cynthia Vigil, Angelica Montano, and Kelly Garrett would be severed, meaning that Ray would be tried for each separately. Prosecutors said that this damaged their case, as each woman's story would otherwise have corroborated and bolstered the other's accounts. The judge also ruled much of the evidence found in the trailer during the 1999 raid could not be admitted in the Garrett or Montano cases, including Ray's audio tape in which he gave detailed descriptions of his abducting and torturing habits. The first trial for crimes against Kelly Garrett resulted in a mistrial after 2 jurors said they found her story unbelievable. Ray's defence was that the sex trailer was part of Ray's fantasy life and any sex was consensual. After a retrial, Ray was convicted on all 12 counts. A week into his trial for crimes against Vigil, Ray agreed to a plea bargain and was sentenced in 2001 to 224 years in prison for numerous offences in the abduction and sexual torture of 3 women at his Elephant Butte home. The plea deal was to obtain leniency for his daughter. Prosecutors stated that the surviving victims had approved of the deal. Ray's daughter, Jessie Ray, was charged with kidnapping and criminal sexual penetration. She pled no contest and received a 30-month sentence with an additional 5 years to be served on probation. Following investigations, it came to light that Cindy Hendy was from Seattle, where her 3 children lived. She had moved to New Mexico to avoid arrest for forgery, theft, and possession of drugs. Reporters would dig up court reports from the previous year in which Hendy had charged a former boyfriend with abuse, but then had told the court to disregard her complaint. "I am so sorry that I lied," she had stated. "I have been in counselling for manic depression." It also came to light that Hendy had told a friend under the influence of alcohol that she'd participated in Ray's attacks because it gave her an adrenaline rush. She confided to this person that there were 4 to 6 people who had been killed, dismembered, and tossed into Elephant Butte Lake. The person didn't quite believe her, but he later told the police and also gave statements to several reporters. Cindy Hendy was willing to deal with prosecutors. In exchange for a considerably reduced sentence, she provided details of Ray's alleged murders, which totaled 14, not 40 or 60, as some accounts had said. According to what she said he had told her, he had once killed a business partner from Phoenix, Billy Bowers, but when he dumped the body into the lake, it had come back up. This was a murder that was unsolved at the time of his arrest. Hendy claimed that Ray had disposed of many of the bodies in the lake and in ravines around south-central New Mexico. He'd been questioned by the FBI in some of the cases, but had always been clever enough to fool them, according to Hendy. Authorities followed leads in 10 different states, using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver-sniffing dogs, but found no bodies. Hendy also revealed that Ray's daughter Jessie had participated with Ray and a man named Dennis Roy Yancey in the murder of a young woman. The victim's name was Marie B. Parker. She was also the mother of 2 young children. Investigators soon located Yancey and brought him in for questioning. In 1999, 27-year-old accomplice Dennis Roy Yancey pleaded guilty to the 1997 murder of Marie Parker in Elephant Butte. Yancey confessed to helping Jessie Ray lure Parker into captivity in her father's trailer. Yancey said that Parker was tortured and that Ray forced him to strangle the woman to death. Prosecutors noted that no forensic evidence was found to tie Parker to the Rays. Yancey was also charged with kidnapping, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit a crime, and tampering with evidence. He was sentenced to 30 years. The Rays were not charged in Parker's murder. Ray sexually tortured and presumably killed his victims using whips, chains, pulleys, straps, clamps, leg spreader bars, surgical blades, electric shock machines, and saws. It is thought that he terrorised many women with these tools for many years with the help of accomplices, some of whom are alleged to have been several of the women he was dating. Ray's torture room was a repurposed, soundproofed cargo trailer located immediately outside his Elephant Butte, New Mexico property, and was called the Toy Box by Ray. Along with numerous sex toys, torture implements, syringes, and detailed diagrams showing ways of inflicting pain, there was a homemade electrical generator to electrocute his victims. In total, Ray is believed to have spent $100,000 on the trailer, fitting it with sex toys and torture devices. Reportedly, Ray constructed elaborate contraptions to confine his victims, such as a fur-lined coffin and a makeshift pillory. In addition, there were also elaborate locks and pulleys to prevent his captors from escaping. A mirror was mounted in the ceiling above the gynecological table to which he strapped his victims, so that they would be able to see themselves be raped and tortured. He has been said to have wanted his victims to see everything he was doing to them. Ray also put his victims in wooden contraptions that bent them over and immobilised them while he had his dogs and sometimes other friends rape them. Ray often had an audio tape recording of his voice played for his victims whenever they regained consciousness. In the transcripts of his tapes, Ray detailed how he would occasionally release his captives, abandoning them by the side of a country road after severely drugging them with barbiturates to induce amnesia, which would prevent them from reporting the assaults. David Parker Ray's crime spree is believed to have spanned from the mid-1950s to the late 1990s. He was likely able to get away with it for so long because he targeted many women who were of low socio-economical status. In addition, the fact that he drugged his victims made it far less likely for the few survivors to remember exactly what had happened to them. He would kidnap about 4 or 5 women a year, holding each of them captive for around 2 to 3 months. Exactly how many murder victims Ray claimed over the years is uncertain. Investigators believe that he raped, tortured, and killed up to 60 individuals over the course of his life, but they have not been able to locate any of their remains. A diary that Ray kept detailed what he did to each victim, but it did not disclose where he buried their bodies. According to accomplice Cindy Hendy, Ray's fatal victims were dismembered, buried, and dumped in the Elephant Butte Lake or in nearby ravines. After his arrest, Ray agreed to show authorities where he had buried his victims, but he died before he could do so, and Hendy was unable to assist investigators in recovering any possible bodies. The effort that David Parker Ray put into his toy box points to a horrifically large number of potential murder victims. Despite all of the evidence, the authorities were unable to create additional cases. And although both Hendy and Yancey identified areas they believed Ray disposed of bodies, police found no human remains in any of these locations. But while we may never know exactly how many people Ray murdered, his confirmed crimes against his surviving victims, Vigil, Montano, and Garrett, were fortunately enough to put him away for life. While police were searching the Toy Box Killer's trailer, authorities also uncovered hundreds of pieces of jewellery, clothes, and other personal effects, according to the FBI. These items were believed to have belonged to Ray's victims. The toy box killer was ultimately sentenced to 224 years in prison. As for Jessie Ray, she received a sentence of 9 years. Cindy Hendy was given 36 years in prison. Both were released early, and they walk free today. David Parker Ray died of a heart attack on May 28, 2002, not long after his life sentence began. He was 62 years old at the time of his death. Though several years have passed since then, authorities are still working to connect the toy box killer to his many suspected murder victims. The toy box killer case stands as a haunting reminder of the depths of human depravity and the capacity for unimaginable cruelty. The survivors, forever marked by the horrors they endured, serve as a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of unspeakable darkness. Thank you for listening to this episode of Shadow Crimes. If you liked this episode, be sure to follow us on social media and check out our website at shadowcrimes.com. You can also listen to this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as all other podcast platforms. Be sure to check out our other episodes and stay tuned for new episodes released every Wednesday here on Shadow Crimes, where mysteries thrive and shadows speak.